So welcome, everyone, to episode 57 of the podcast Porter-Pedia.
57 already?
I know, it's wild. But yes, the show where we explore the world, the work, and the life of the legendary Cole Porter.
And we have a really exciting pivot today, actually.
We do. We are starting a brand new series today where we're going to examine the specific, incredibly dense references that Porter used in his famous List songs.
Yeah, those List songs are legendary.
Right. So today, our roadmap is focused entirely on his 1941 song, Farming.
Such a good one.
It is. And just to tease what's coming in the future for this series, we are eventually going to unpack the references in songs like They Couldn't Compare to You.
Oh, I love that.
And I'm throwing a ball tonight, plus The Physician.
There's so much to unpack in those.
So much. But today, it is all about farming. And I have to say right up front to you, the listener, if you love this kind of historical and cultural unspooling, you absolutely must buy the book Porter-Pedia.
Oh, it's essential.
It really is. It explains every single reference Porter ever dropped, over 1,300 of them.
Which is just a staggering amount of research.
Totally staggering. We've linked it right in the episode description, so go grab that. But let's set the scene for you to really understand why farming is so brilliant.
Context is everything here.
It really is. The year is 1941.
Right, which is a heavily burdened year.
Yeah.
The world is tilting violently toward war. The Blitz has been devastating London. Geopolitical uncertainty is at an all-time high.
The headlines every single morning are grim, to put it mildly.
Exactly. The stakes for humanity are astronomical.
But Cole Porter, he looks at the headlines and he completely ignores the tragedy.
He just bypasses the geopolitics entirely.
Yeah, he focuses his laser-sharp wit on something arguably more enduring and definitely more ridiculous.
The absurdity of fashionable, ultra-wealthy people trying to appear authentic.
Which is such a brilliant, almost defiant comedic pivot, you know.
It is. While the world is literally on fire, he looks at his ultra-wealthy friends and says, "Look at you all dressing up in denim and pretending to churn butter."
It's so funny you say that because I was thinking about how to explain this 1941 phenomenon to you listening right now, and it hit me.
Oh.
This is exactly what we see today with modern celebrities and influencers.
Oh, the cottagecore aesthetic.
Yes, the ultimate cottagecore aesthetic. You see these multimillionaires or tech billionaires buying massive multi-thousand-acre ranches out in Wyoming or Montana.
Right, and they put on perfectly distressed $2,000 designer overalls.
Exactly. To pose on a pristine, heavily staffed ranch for a curated social media post.
They want the visual aesthetic of hard, honest labor without ever actually getting a single blister.
Yes. Porter was diagnosing a timeless celebrity quirk.
What's fascinating here is that human vanity, especially the vanity of the elite, doesn't really evolve. It just changes its wardrobe.
That is so true.
Porter recognized that the desire to seem rooted, or of the earth, is often the ultimate luxury item for people who have never actually had to work the earth.
Because when you have everything money can buy.
The only thing left to acquire is the illusion of working-class authenticity.
Man, that hits hard. So our mission for you today in this exploration is to decode this musical time capsule line by line.
We're going to explain exactly who these people were and why they mattered so much in 1941.
And how Porter brilliantly, systematically put high society right into the dirt.
It's really a masterclass in satire, but to understand how the satire functions, we first have to understand the mechanics of the trend itself.
Right. Because to understand how a rural agricultural trend takes over elite urban society, we first have to look at the people who invent and enforce these trends.
Trends don't just spontaneously generate in a vacuum.
No, they are decreed from on high, dictated by the arbiters of taste.
And Porter starts the song by citing his source.
Yeah, the opening lyric is quoting Mr. Charlie Knickerbocker.
Which is such a great name.
I love it so much. Because to a modern ear, Charlie Knickerbocker sounds like a cartoon character, or maybe a brand of very fancy, slightly outdated trousers.
Right. But he was very real and very powerful.
So who was this? How did this person have the power to make millionaires buy tractors?
Well, Charlie Knickerbocker was actually the highly recognizable pseudonym for a man named Maury Henry Biddlepal.
Okay.
He was the premier society columnist of the era. And to understand his power, you really have to understand how gossip columns functioned in the 1930s and 40s.
Because this is pre-internet, no social media.
Exactly. If you wanted to know what the wealthy and social elite were doing, who they were seeing, what they were wearing, you read Charlie Knickerbocker.
He had the scoop on all the scandals.
Oh, all of them. His column was syndicated across the entire country. Millions of people read it over their morning coffee.
So he's basically the algorithm of 1941.
That's a great way to put it.
He is the entire For You page wrapped up into one guy. If he pushes a concept to your feed, it becomes reality.
Precisely. He had the power to make or break a socialite.
Wow.
So Porter's choice to start the song with Knickerbocker is highly deliberate. Knickerbocker represents the massive machinery of trend making.
So if he reports that farming's the new passion of the elite must blindly follow.
Or risk being seen as completely out of touch.
The underlying joke here is that Porter is treating this gossip columnist like an infallible fashion oracle.
Right, taking the word of a man whose entire job is to drink martinis and report on cocktail parties.
And using it as a serious prescription for intense manual labor.
It's the logic of, well, Charlie says we need to raise livestock, so I guess we're canceling the Hamptons and buying tractors.
And from that authoritative, ridiculous decree, Porter launches into his catalog of victims.
He immediately targets the people who have spent their entire lives cultivating an image of delicate refinement.
It's self-made aristocrats.
Exactly.
Which brings us to our next incredibly vivid lyric. Lady Mendel's Climbin' Trees.
Oh, Lady Mendel.
Now, Lady Mendel, whose given name was Elsie de Wolfe, what a fascinating, towering character in the history of design.
She really was a titan. Elsie de Wolfe was a pioneering interior designer and a massively prominent socialite.
And by the time this song came out in 1941, she was well into her 60s, right?
Yes, she was. And what's crucial to know about her to get the joke is that she was a master of self-invention.
How so?
Well, she actually started out as a stage actress and showgirl, but she transitioned into being a highly sought-after decorator.
She basically invented the modern profession of interior design, didn't she?
She essentially did.
And her specific aesthetic is so important here. She wasn't just throwing pillows on a couch.
Far from it. She rebelled against the dark, heavy, cluttered Victorian style that was popular when she was young.
Right.
She introduced light, airy spaces. She loved mirrors, light colors, animal prints, delicate indoor trellis work.
Very pristine, feminine, and hyper-elegant.
And eventually, she married Sir Charles Mendel, a British diplomat.
Ah, so that's where the Lady Mendel title comes from.
Precisely. They married in 1926. Now, Lady Mendel was a social courtesy title rather than a formal aristocratic rank born of royal blood.
But she leaned into it heavily.
Oh, heavily. She was the absolute picture of cultivated aristocratic elegance. She was famous for her refined taste, her extravagant parties in Versailles.
And her extreme dedication to her own image.
Yes.
So she has spent decades and a considerable amount of money and energy building this impenetrable fortress of sophistication.
She is the epitome of high society grace.
She is essentially the Anna Wintour of 1941 interior design. And what does Cole Porter do with her?
He forces her up a tree.
Lady Mendel's Climbin' Trees.
Ah.
It's such brilliant, visceral, visual slapstick.
It really is.
He takes a woman defined by meticulous refinement, a woman in her 60s holding a courtesy title, and puts her in a position of undignified, childish play.
You can just picture the silk garments and the pearls getting caught in the rough bark.
Exactly. It completely strips away all the artifice. You cannot look dignified climbing a tree.
It's a physically awkward, entirely unrefined action.
And Porter continues this theme of high-low collision, pushing it even further with the ultimate contrast involving Liz Whitney and the Duke of Verdura.
Oh, this is a spectacular visual.
It might be my favorite in the entire song. Let's talk about Liz Whitney. The lyric places her on her bin of manure wearing a clip designed by the Duke of Verdura.
Such a great rhyme.
Let's break this down for you. First off, who was Liz Whitney?
Elizabeth Liz Whitney Tippett was a staggeringly wealthy American socialite and a prominent horse breeder.
She was part of the elite Whitney family.
Yes, who were essentially American royalty. She was a true fixture of the American social register in the 1930s and 40s.
And she owned that enormous estate in Virginia.
Llangollen Farm, yes.
Nice, yeah.
Legendary place. So, unlike some of the other people in this song, she actually was deeply involved in equestrian circles and the outdoors.
But very much from a position of immense glamour, privilege, and staff.
Exactly. She wasn't mucking out the stalls herself. She's the owner of the estate, not the ranch hand.
Okay, and who is this Duke of Verdura who designed her clip? First, what is a clip?
A clip is a piece of fine jewelry similar to a brooch.
Got it. And the Duke?
The Duke of Verdura was Fulco Santistefano della Certa.
Wow, what a name.
He was a genuine Sicilian-born aristocrat who turned into a celebrated elite jeweler.
And he worked with Coco Chanel, right?
He did. He started out working for Chanel in Paris. He was the man who designed her iconic, chunky Maltese cross
Oh,
cuffs.
those are famous.
He also collaborated with Salvador Dali on surrealist jewelry, and when he moved to America, he shaped modern haute couture and designed for Hollywood stars.
And the highest tier of socialites.
Yes.
So we're talking about the absolute zenith of luxury here. Verdura's pieces were made of heavy gold, vibrant enamel, massive precious stones.
They were vibrant, bold, and unimaginably expensive statement pieces.
Worn to galas and high society dinners. So you have a woman representing dynastic American wealth, wearing a highly recognizable, incredibly expensive piece of jewelry created by a Sicilian aristocrat who designs for Coco Chanel.
And Porter sits her on a literal pile of animal excrement.
It's just wild. This raises a very important point about Porter's signature comedic technique, I think.
Yes, the joke relies entirely on the sharp, sudden, violent collision of high fashion and literal filth.
Notice that he doesn't just put her on a tractor or have her holding a pitchfork.
No, he puts her on a bin of manure.
It renders immense wealth completely ridiculous.
Yeah.
He takes the ultimate symbol of luxury of Verdura clip and plunges it into the most base, foul-smelling reality of actual farming.
It's so visceral.
Now, I have to push back here for a second, or at least ask a question that I think you, the listener, might be wondering right now.
Sure.
When Porter writes these lines, putting his friends in manure, making them look totally foolish, is he mocking them out of malice? Is this a mean-spirited, eat-the-rich style takedown?
That is a fantastic question, and it's really essential to understanding Porter's tone. The short answer is no, it's not malice.
Okay.
Porter was the ultimate insider. He attended the exact same parties as Elsie DeWolf and Liz Whitney.
He ran in these exact same circles.
He probably owned Verdura jewelry himself. This is much more of an affectionate ribbing.
Like an inside joke broadcast to the general public.
Exactly. He is winking at them, saying, I see exactly what we are all doing. I see the affectation, and isn't it absurd?
This is more like a celebrity roast.
Yes. If anything, being mentioned in a Cole Porter list song, even if you were sitting on a pile of manure, was a massive badge of honor.
It meant you had arrived.
It meant you were culturally relevant enough for the joke to land.
It meant you were in the club. Okay, that makes total sense. So once the society columnists like Charlie Knickerbocker ordained farming as the new passion and the ultra-wealthy socialites adopt it, the trend inevitably spreads.
Because if there is one group of people desperate to stay relevant and beloved by the public,
It's actors.
it's actors. Which brings us to the serious titans of the Broadway stage.
Yes, the Broadway elite were definitely not immune to trends. And their inherent gravitas, their deep seriousness about their craft, gave Porter the perfect opportunity to deflate their grandeur.
Let's start with the ultimate tragedian.
The lyric goes, Kit Cornell is shell and peas. Who was Kit Cornell?
Katharine Cornell, known affectionately to her friends and colleagues as Kit. She was the undisputed, celebrated queen of serious American stage drama.
She was starring in major productions like No Time for Comedy, right?
Yes, and she had famously played Juliet in Romeo and Juliet. She helped define what theatrical prestige meant for American audiences in the mid-20th century.
She is the person you go to see when you want to feel profound, earth-shattering emotions. When you want high art with a capital H and a capital A.
Absolutely. She's commanding the stage, projecting to the back row, bringing audiences to tears.
Her entire public identity is built on emotional weight and dramatic scale.
And Porter reduces her to a kitchen laborer. Shell and peas.
The humor here is entirely in the collapse of scale. The immense weight of high theatrical art is shrunk down to the most mundane, repetitive chore imaginable.
It's like imagining Daniel Day-Lewis meticulously folding laundry, you know?
Or Meryl Streep scraping the burnt cheese off a baking pan. The disconnect between the grandeur of the artist and the microscopic tedium of the task is where the comedy lives.
It's brilliant.
And speaking of contrasts, Porter sets up this wonderful juxtaposition between two very different kinds of writers and performers sharing the same first name.
Ah, yes. Fannie Hurst and Fannie Bryce.
Let's start with Fannie Hurst. The lyric says Fannie Hurst is hauling logs.
Now, Fannie Hurst was a massively best-selling author and a highly visible public intellectual.
She wrote Backstreet, didn't she?
She did, which was a huge success. It dealt with complex themes of illicit love and social constraints, and had been adapted into a major Hollywood film.
She was also very active in social justice and women's rights.
Right. She was, through and through, a woman of the mind.
And Porter takes this woman of the mind, this intellectual heavyweight, and replaces her intellectual output with brute, sweating, physical exertion.
Hauling logs.
It's hilarious because it completely displaces her value. In the farm economy, nobody cares if you row Backstreet.
The cows don't care about your stance on civic causes. They just need you to drag this heavy piece of wood across the yard.
It shows how rural labor is the great equalizer. Doesn't care about your bibliography.
But then in the very next breath, he immediately contrasts her with the other Fanny.
Fanny Bryce.
Fanny
Bryce is feeding hogs.
Now, Fanny Bryce is a total legend. Comedian, singer, the real-life inspiration for the musical Funny Girl.
Famous for her wildly popular radio character on the Baby Snooks show. She was a household name.
And what's fascinating here is that the line for Fanny Bryce operates very differently than the one for Fanny Hurst.
How so?
Well, having Bryce feed hogs isn't necessarily subversive or humiliating. It's actually a logical extension of her public persona.
Because she thrived on broad physical comedy.
Exactly. She came up through the Ziegfeld Follies and vaudeville. She was perfectly willing to cross her eyes, make funny faces, and act ridiculous for a laugh.
So having her slop the pigs actually suits her perfectly.
It does. It shows that Porter wasn't just using a Mad Libs formula where he randomly assigned chores to names.
He knew exactly how to tailor his rural punishments.
Yes. He gave Hurst a task that contradicted her intellectual nature, and he gave Bryce a task that amplified her comedic one.
That is so true.
Yeah.
You can totally picture Fanny Bryce doing a hilarious 5-minute bit wrestling with a pig in the mud.
Oh, absolutely.
But then we get to a lyric that feels, honestly, a bit shocking. It feels like Porter had a real bone to pick.
Ah, yes.
Let's talk about the eccentric poet, Michael Strange. The lyric is, Michael Strange has got the mange.
It is brutal, isn't it?
It really is. Let's provide some necessary background so you can understand why this cuts so deep. Who was Michael Strange?
Michael Strange was born Blanche Marie Louise Ulrichs.
Okay.
She was the former wife of the incredibly famous actor John Barrymore. She was a poet, an actress, and a playwright.
And she used the masculine pen name Michael Strange originally to distance her high society reputation from the sometimes highly erotic content of her poetry, right?
Right, which was a fairly common tactic for female writers of the era.
Yeah.
But she took it further.
She just adopted Michael Strange as her entire public persona.
Yes. She even hosted a popular poetry and music radio program on New York's War. She dressed in a very avant-garde, somewhat masculine style.
She was deeply invested in cultivating an aura of bohemian strangeness.
Exactly, mystical eccentricity. She wanted to be seen as a tortured, unique artist.
Okay, so she has this highly curated, slightly mysterious, deeply bohemian identity. And Porter writes, Michael Strange has got the mange. I have to say, looking purely at the mechanics of the songwriting, the sheer perfection of that rhyme, strange in mange, it is incredible. It is so satisfying to hear.
From a technical standpoint, yes.
But conceptually, it is so cruel.
Because mange is a horrific skin disease caused by parasitic mites that affects animals. Dogs get mange, livestock get mange.
It causes intense itching, hair loss, and scabbing.
It's like he's looking at her carefully crafted bohemian eccentricity and saying, oh, you want to be different and weird. You want to be a tortured artist of the earth? How about a grotesque animal skin infection? Is that earthy enough for you?
It honestly feels like a 1940s rap diss track, disguised as a jaunty show tune. He just dropped the mic on her.
It is a very sharp reminder that while Porter was generally affectionate with his peers, his wit could be absolutely merciless.
He knew exactly where the weak spots in a person's armor were.
And for someone who curated their aesthetic as carefully as Michael Strange, a gross physical deformity is the ultimate insult.
Wow. Okay, so from the intellectual theater of New York and the literary salons of the East Coast, the farming trend inevitably spreads west.
Because if there is one place that excels at manufacturing fake authenticity, it's Hollywood.
Absolutely. Hollywood in 1941 was an absolute image factory.
The studio system was at the height of its power. Studios controlled every single aspect of a star's public persona, down to who they dated and what they wore to the grocery store.
And Porter plays with those heavily manufactured personas by doing two things. He either wildly amplifies them to the point of absurdity, or he completely shatters them.
Let's look at how he amplifies sexuality first.
Starting with the iconic Mae West. The lyric goes, Dear Mae West is at her best in the hay.
Mae West required absolutely no exaggeration from Porter. She was the ultimate American sex symbol.
Famous for her bold, unapologetic persona, and her endless stream of double entendres.
She constantly battled censorship, so she was a master of saying things that sounded innocent but were actually incredibly provocative.
So Porter puts her in the hay, which is just a brilliant piece of lyrical economy.
The word hay is doing so much heavy lifting here.
It perfectly bridges the agricultural setting, literally, a pile of dried grass used to feed horses with the heavily erotic suggestion of a roll in the hay.
What's fascinating here is that Porter isn't subverting her image at all.
Right. Unlike Lady Mendel climbing a tree or Catherine Cornell forced into the kitchen who are humiliated by their tasks, Mae West thrives.
Porter lets her highly potent sexual persona flourish in a rural environment.
And he does something very similar with another performer, Margie Hart.
Yes, the lyric is, the natives think it's utterly utter when Margie Hart starts churning her butter.
Who was Margie Hart? Because that name isn't as well known today as Mae West.
She was one of America's most famous and highest paid burlesque performers.
Oh, wow.
She was an incredibly prominent striptease artist in New York's nightclub scene. And she was actually known in the press by this fascinating nickname, the poor man's Garbo.
I love that nickname. It implies so much glamour, but for the working class.
Exactly.
So she's churning her butter. Now, churning butter is a vigorous, rhythmic, up and down motion. Technically, it is an agricultural necessity.
But rhythmically, visually, and contextually, when applied to a famous striptease artist,
It is incredibly suggestive.
it is entirely suggestive. Porter is seamlessly blending burlesque physical performance with domestic labor.
He's saying you can take the burlesque dancer out of the nightclub and put her on the farm, but you can't stop her from putting on a show for the locals.
Exactly. But where he amplifies the personas of West and Hart, he takes a massive sledgehammer to the mystique of our next figure.
Greta Garbo.
The actual Garbo, not
Yeah.
the poor man's version.
Right. The lyric is, Garbo Peep has led her sheep all astray. Now, you really have to understand Greta Garbo to get why this is so funny.
Greta Garbo was a legendary Swedish-American actress. She starred in masterpieces like Camille and Ninotchka.
She was celebrated for her immense soulful talent.
But even more so for her completely impenetrable mystique. She famously retired from acting at the very young age of 35 to live the rest of her life in near-total seclusion in New York.
She was the ultimate symbol of aloof, untouchable European glamour. She's the one who famously said, I want to be alone.
And Porter looks at this untouchable, mysterious icon and turns her into a literal nursery rhyme. Garbo Peep.
It's a multi-level joke. First, you have the phonetic pun on Little Bo Peep. Then you are collapsing this high, serious glamour into the simplicity and comic incompetence of a children's story.
Exactly. Little Bo Peep lost her sheep and didn't know where to find them.
Porter's basically saying, this great mysterious artist, this genius of the silver screen, can't even keep track of her livestock.
It completely shatters the mystique. You can't be an aloof, mysterious goddess when you are chasing a runaway sheep through a meadow.
He completely punctures the bubble of seriousness surrounding her. And he does something even more devastating and arguably more dangerous to Hollywood's resident tough guy, George Raft.
Oh, this is a fascinating lyrical takedown.
The lyric is wild. Don't inquire of Georgie Raft. Why his cow has never calved. Georgie's bull is beautiful, but he's gay.
Let's unpack Georgie Raft first.
Yes, please.
George Raft was a major film actor in the 1930s and 40s, famous for playing tough, ruthless gangsters in hit films like Scarface and They Drive by Night.
But what made Raft unique was that he wasn't really acting right.
Right. He grew up in Hell's Kitchen and had very well-documented real-life underworld mob ties. He was childhood friends with mobsters like Bugsy Siegel and Oni Madden.
Wow.
This gave his tough guy persona an air of genuine menace and street-level authenticity. He was a highly protected symbol of macho bravado in Hollywood.
He's the guy you do not mess with. And Porter undermines all of that carefully constructed mob-backed masculinity with a single word at the end of the stanza.
Yes, and we need to discuss the incredibly layered meaning of the word gay in 1941 to understand the surgical precision of this joke.
Because on the surface, for the mainstream public, it could simply mean lighthearted, happy, or carefree.
Which in itself contrasts humorously with the image of a massive, charging, aggressive bull.
Right, a happy, carefree bull is a funny image. But Porter's doing more than that.
Much more. In the theatrical, bohemian, and underground social circles that Porter inhabited, and let's remember, Porter himself was a gay man, gay was absolutely understood as a coded signifier for homosexuality or effeminacy.
It was an insider term.
By making Raff's prize bull gay, Porter is directly puncturing Raff's hyper-masculine tough guy image. He is sneaking a queer joke past the censors and aiming it directly at the most macho man in Hollywood.
It is a devastatingly effective subversion. It's like taking the most aggressive action movie star today and implying their beloved, terrifying guard dog is actually wearing a pink tutu when no one is looking.
It's incredible how much damage Porter can do with a perfectly placed adjective.
He was a sniper with words. And he also relied on these grotesque, highly visceral visual gags for some of his Hollywood friends. Let's look at Monty Woolley and Elsa Maxwell.
Yes, Monty Woolley. The lyric writes that Monty Woolley has boll weevils in his beard.
Who was Monty Woolley?
Monty Woolley was a prominent stage and film actor, famously starring in The Man Who Came to Dinner right around this time in 1941.
And he was actually part of Cole Porter's intimate inner circle, right? They were very close friends.
Yes, they were. And Woolley was very well known for his distinctive, highly cultivated, perfectly manicured white beard. It was his trademark.
And Porter says he has boll weevils in it. Boll weevils. For those who don't know, boll weevils are literally crop pests. They are beetles that destroy cotton crops.
The visual gag is just so gross and incredibly funny. Woolley has become so overly immersed in the fake farm life that he is literally infested with agricultural pests.
His beautifully cultivated facial hair has become a breeding ground for destructive bugs.
It completely strips away all his worldly sophistication. You cannot be a suave intellectual when you have beetles crawling out of your chin.
And Porter does the exact same thing, stripping away dignity to Elsa Maxwell.
Ah, Elsa Maxwell. The lyric says, Miss Elsa Maxwell, so the folks tattle, got well goosed while dehorning her cattle.
Elsa Maxwell is a crucial figure here.
She was a flamboyant gossip columnist, but more importantly, she was the premier professional party planner for the international elite.
She was credited with introducing the scavenger hunt to high society, right?
Yes, she was known as the hostess with the mostest. Her entire life, her entire career, was built on orchestrating and controlling elite social events. She was the puppet master. She pulled all the strings.
So Porter places her in an agricultural setting where she has absolute zero control. Dehorning cattle is a violent, messy, highly dangerous job. You are wrestling with a massive beast.
And while she's doing it, she gets well goosed, which is another classic Porter double meaning.
Exactly. On a farm, a goose is an aggressive bird. But in 1940s slang, to get goosed means getting pinched or grabbed forcefully on the backside.
So the master of control, the woman who dictates where everyone sits at the royal banquet, is caught completely off guard, bent over a cow, and humiliated by her own livestock.
It's the ultimate loss of dignity for someone whose entire currency is social standing and control. Okay, let's keep moving. Because Porter proves that it isn't just actors and socialites who fall victim to the absurdity of trend following.
He drags the most serious political and literary figures of the era right into the farmyard.
He spares absolutely no one. Now, as we move into this next part of Porter's lyrical hit list, we're going to touch on some major political and social figures of the 1940s.
These were people who represented both the progressive and conservative viewpoints of that era.
Right. And just a quick note for you listening. As your guides on this exploration, our goal isn't to take a stance on 1940s politics or endorse either the left-wing or right-wing icons we're about to discuss.
Absolutely not.
We're purely looking at how Porter used these incredibly polarizing figures for a laugh. We are just reporting on the content provided and analyzing the lyrics.
Our focus is entirely on the mechanics of the satire and how Porter flattens serious ideology into pop culture.
Okay, with that said, let's look at the politician, Wendell Willkie. The lyric is, "They tell me cows who are feeling milky all give cream when they're milked by Willkie."
Wendell Willkie was a massive public figure at the time this song was written. He was a corporate lawyer and the Republican presidential candidate who ran against Franklin D. Roosevelt in the highly contentious 1940 election.
He represented big business and a certain kind of capitalist optimism.
And Porter inserts this serious presidential candidate into a farming context and gives him this exaggerated, almost magical capability.
The cows don't just give regular milk for Willkie, they give cream.
It's a very playful exaggeration of a politician's supposed charisma and promises. Politicians are always promising miracles on the campaign trail, promising that they can make the impossible happen.
Porter is saying, Willkie is so persuasive, he's such a smooth talker, that he can convince a cow to skip the milk entirely and go straight to the luxury product, the cream.
And knowing Cole Porter, There is definitely a playful flirtation with mild sexual innuendo there as well, with the words feeling milky and milked by Wilkie.
Oh, for sure. But he doesn't just target the corporate politicians. He also takes aim at the fiercely socially conscious, progressive figures of the time, like Clifford Odets and John Steinbeck.
Let's start with Odets. The lyric is, when Cliff Odets found a new tomato, he plowed under the group theater.
This one requires some deep theatrical context. Who was Clifford Odets?
Clifford Odets was a brilliant American playwright and screenwriter. He wrote intensely socially conscious, politically progressive, working-class dramas like Waiting for Lefty and Awake and Sing.
And crucially, he was a founding member of the Group Theater in New York.
Yes. The group theater was an enormously influential theater collective dedicated to serious political art. They introduced the Stanislavski method of acting to America. They were trying to change the world through art.
They were deeply earnest. And Porter says Odets plowed under the Group Theater. Now, to plow under is a very specific farming term.
It means to destroy or bury crops, usually to enrich the soil for something else. You are killing what you grew.
What Porter is suggesting here is a sharp critique of how easily high-minded political art is abandoned for a new, shiny trend or a commercial payout.
He's saying that Odets took this serious, socially conscious movement in the group theater and just buried it in the dirt because he found a new tomato.
And tomato is 1940s slang for a new girl, right?
Yes, a new girl or a new distraction, or in this broader context, the new wealthy farming trend or the lure of Hollywood money.
Porter mocks the idea that earnest artistic movements can withstand the flattening, corrupting forces of elite fashion and commercial success.
And he does something incredibly similar and arguably even more reductive to the great American novelist John Steinbeck.
The lyric is simply Steinbeck's Growing Grapes of Wrath.
John Steinbeck had just published The Grapes of Wrath in 1939, just 2 years before this song.
It was an absolute cultural touchstone. It won the Pulitzer Prize.
It is a profound, sprawling, tragic novel about the struggles of the Joad family, who are migrant workers fleeing the Dust Bowl during the Great Depression. It deals with literal starvation, crushing poverty,
And the utter desperation of the American underclass. It is arguably the heaviest, most serious, most socially devastating piece of literature of its time. It forced America to look at its own poverty.
and Porter just literalizes the metaphor. Steinbeck is growing grapes of wrath.
Unpack the brilliance of that reduction. He takes a sweeping social tragedy, a book about starvation, and flattens it into literal agriculture.
He treats grapes of wrath like a specific variety of crop, like a hybrid tomato that you can just buy seeds for at the local hardware store and plant in your wealthy gentleman's farm.
It's mind-bogglingly reductive. It's like saying, oh, I hear Victor Hugo's planting a lovely field of Les Miserables this spring.
It takes all the sociopolitical weight of the novel, all the suffering of the Great Depression, and turns it into a casual gardening hobby for the elite.
And then, to round out this exploration of the cultural zeitgeist, Porter brings in the soundtrack of the era to score the whole ridiculous scene. Guy Lombardo.
Guy Lombardo, rumor hath, toots his horn and all the corn starts to sway.
Guy Lombardo was a Canadian-American bandleader. He led the incredibly popular band Guy Lombardo and his Royal Canadians.
They were famous for what was called sweet jazz, and they were ubiquitous because of their iconic New Year's Eve radio broadcasts. You couldn't escape his music.
So Porter writes this whimsical exaggeration of Lombardo's musical influence. He's saying the music is so pervasive, so universally appealing and middle of the road, that it literally controls the
He
crops.
plays a note on his horn, and the corn dances in rhythm.
If we connect all of these figures together, Wilkie, Odets, Steinbeck, Lombardo, this raises an important question. What is Porter really saying about American culture here? Is he making a deeper statement?
I think he is.
Is he saying that in America, serious literature like Steinbeck, serious political races like Wilkie's, and serious world-changing theater like Odets are ultimately all just consumed as another form of light entertainment by the upper class?
Are they all just grist for the same high society mill? I
Yeah.
think that's exactly the thesis. In the
Yeah.
eyes of the Charlie Knickerbockers of the world, a Pulitzer-winning novel about starvation and a new brand of designer tractor are just two different conversational topics to bring up at a cocktail party.
Porter is highlighting how the elite consumed culture. The tragedy of the Dust Bowl and the music of Guy Lombardo all get flattened into the exact same thing. Trends.
That is so incredibly perceptive. It really elevates the song from just a funny list to a real piece of cultural criticism.
Okay, we have covered the final song, But here is where it gets really interesting for us in this discussion.
Oh, the cutting room floor.
Yes, because looking at the verses Porter wrote, but ultimately cut before the song was published, reveals even more about his creative process and shows just how many icons he considered throwing into the mud.
The unused verses are an absolute treasure trove for understanding how Porter's mind worked.
It's like finding the deleted scenes of a modern comedy movie. You watch them and think, oh, that joke was great. Why did they cut it?
And usually it's about pacing or tone, or the joke was just a little too weird for a mainstream audience. Let's look at some of these deleted scenes, starting with Hollywood failures and miscast elegance.
Yes, there's a fascinating lyric about the actress Anna Sten and the producer Samuel Goldwyn. The lyric is, digging in his fertile glen, Goldwyn dug up Anna Sten.
Samuel Goldwyn was a massive, incredibly powerful Hollywood producer. He brought this Ukrainian-born actress, Anna Sten, to Hollywood in the 1930s.
He poured money into her, heavily promoting her in the press as the next Greta Garbo.
But her Hollywood career completely failed to meet expectations. The public just didn't connect with her. She became a symbol of studio hype over actual bankable talent.
And Porter writes that Goldwyn dug up Anna Sten. The phrase dug up works brilliantly on two levels. Agriculturally, it's what you do to a root vegetable. You dig it out of the dirt.
But metaphorically, in the entertainment industry, it means reviving a failed, overhyped project or trying to make something happen that is already dead.
It's almost like digging up a corpse. It's a very sharp, very inside baseball industry joke.
Then we have Fred Astaire. The lyric was, Fred Astaire has raised a hair and it's gray.
Fred Astaire is the absolute epitome of charm, grace, and rhythmic genius. When you watch him dance, it is pure kinetic poetry.
And Porter has him doing what? Simply raising a rabbit. He applies supreme, unmatched kinetic elegance to something utterly trivial, stationary, and passive.
But my absolute favorite of the unused verses, without a doubt, has to be the surreal pairings. The lyric goes, so Harpo Marx, in a moment of folly, had his barn repainted by Dolly.
This is arguably the most conceptually perfect pairing in the entire text. Let's look at the two figures. You have Salvador Dali, the famous Spanish surrealist painter known for the persistence of memory.
The melting clocks, the lobster telephones, and dreamlike, bizarre, deeply psychological imagery.
And you pair him with Harpo Marx, the silent, curly-haired, trench coat-wearing member of the Marx Brothers.
Known for anarchic pantomime comedy, honking horns, and childlike surreal humor on screen.
Why is this so perfect? Because the idea of rural, utilitarian, highly practical American architecture, a barn being subjected to European high art surrealism, is a joke, operating on an incredibly high intellectual level.
Imagine driving past a standard red American farmhouse and seeing a barn painted with giant, dripping pocket watches and long-legged elephants.
It perfectly encapsulates the absurdity of the elite trying to appropriate the rural. They can't just have a barn, they have to have a Dali barn.
Yeah, it's a tragedy that line got cut. It paints such a vivid picture. But Porter also made some absurd reductions of other massive stars that didn't make the final edit, like Orson Welles and Dolores Del Rio.
The unused lyric was, why Orson Welles, that wonderful actor, has Del Rio driving a tractor.
Orson Welles in 1941 was red hot. He'd caused a national panic with his War of the Worlds radio broadcast, and he had just directed and starred in Citizen Kane.
He was the certified boy genius of American culture.
And Dolores Del Rio was a groundbreaking, internationally famous Mexican actress, a massive star of the silent and early sound eras, renowned for her immense beauty and cultural contributions. They were a high-profile couple at the time.
And Porter reduces all of that cinematic grandeur, all that prestige, all of Wells's directing genius and Del Rio's glamour to simply operating heavy machinery, driving a tractor.
It's like imagining Christopher Nolan fresh off winning an Oscar and Zendaya working the drive-thru window at a local fast food restaurant. The scale of their fame makes the mundane task hilarious.
And finally, we have Marlene Dietrich. Famed for her sultry voice, her androgynous glamour in films like The Blue Angel, her impeccable elegance, and her deep mystery.
And Porter writes, Dietrich, that great movie queen, lifts her leg and lays an egg. What a lay.
That is a complete and total inversion of her carefully guarded identity. It's a gender reversal. She's laying an egg, which is what a hen does, not a glamorous movie star, and it's an embrace of total fizzle slapstick absurdity.
So, comparing these to deleted scenes, why cut them? I speculate that maybe lines like the Dietrich one were just a bit too aggressively absurd. Turning her into a chicken might have broken the reality of the song.
Or maybe the Dolly joke was just too intellectual. It requires the listener to process two wildly different avant-garde concepts in a split second.
Whereas shell and peas is immediate and universally understood. It proves that Porter rigorously edited his work. He wasn't just throwing names at a wall, he was looking for the perfect, sustained balance of high and lowbrow humor.
He was a master craftsman. He knew exactly how much the audience could take and how fast they could process the references before the joke wore thin or became too abstract.
Which brings us to the end of our analysis of the source material. We need to synthesize all of this. We've looked at the arbiters of taste, the Broadway stars, the Hollywood legends, the politicians, and the unused verses. What does farming ultimately reveal?
It reveals that Porter wasn't just randomly name-dropping to show off who he knew, he was acting as a cartographer of culture.
He created a precise, rhyming map of 1941 fame. He documented exactly who mattered, why they mattered, and exactly how they were perceived by the public. He captured the zeitgeist in amber.
The core insight here, the underlying philosophy of the entire song, is that public identity is always a performance. Whether you are Katharine Cornell performing tragic theater, or George Raft performing mafia-backed masculinity, or Lady Mendel performing European aristocracy, it is all an act.
And Porter asks the ultimate question. When you remove the spotlight, the script, the designer clothes, and the carefully curated image, what is left?
What's left is a refined actress shelling peas in a kitchen, or a priceless jewel resting on a pile of manure. The artifice collapses the moment it touches the dirt. The dirt always wins.
It really makes you think about how we construct our own identities. And I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought to mull over as you go about your day. Today, as we discussed earlier, we live in an era where celebrities and tech billionaires buy massive ranches. They post these heavily filtered, highly produced photos of themselves, chopping wood or wearing pristine work boots, projecting this authentic rustic labor on their social media feeds.
Oh, yeah. Constantly.
My question to you is, are we still trapped in the exact same cycle of cultivated fame that Porter was mocking in 1941? Has human vanity changed at all? Or are we just writing new verses to farming every time we open our phones?
I think it's safe to say Cole Porter would have an absolute field day analyzing a modern Instagram feed. He would see right through the filters.
He absolutely would. The song remains the same, just the names change. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode. It has been an absolute blast unpacking this musical time capsule with you.
It's been a sincere pleasure.
We will see you next time when we tackle the incredible references in our next list song exploration. Until then, just remember, no matter how perfect the vintage photograph looks, someone is always just outside the frame, standing in the mud. See you next time.